international, police in Istanbul are using tear gas and water cannons to disperse protests on the first anniversary of huge demonstrations over individual and press freedoms. Well, as promised, we can now cross live to RT's Sara Firth, who is there. Sara, bring us more on what's happening right now in Istanbul.
Well, we've just come off the streets where we saw the police move in to clear the protesters that had gathered off one of the side streets just near Taksim Square, where they'd been hoping to march to. And now it's the Gezi anniversary, 1 year since we saw the Gezi protests. And remember, that started as an environmental dispute, protesters gathering in Gezi Park in Taksim to protest against the government's plans to turn the park into a shopping mall. Now, the police response to that then sparked this widespread protest action and anger, not just in Istanbul, but across Turkey. Today, they gathered again, and it was an absolutely massive police response. It's been reported 25,000 police officers drafted in from all across Turkey to be here in Istanbul to stop this protest movement on the anniversary reaching Taksim Square. Now, the protesters had gathered, and I think it's quite important to point out because we've seen lots of protests. Tensions in Turkey are very high at the moment. We've had the recent Soma mining disaster, that tragedy unfolding and anger sparking the government's response to that. Tensions are high, but in past protests you do sometimes see provocative actions, you see rocks being thrown. And today the protesters who turned out wanted to mark the anniversary and they wanted to make their points, and they actually had a sit-down protest in the minutes leading up to the police moving in. And I think that's quite important to note because it does say a lot about the police response and about the government's mentality towards these protests, because 1 year on, you're seeing the same tactics that sparked such anger being used again. And we saw the tear gas dispersing the crowds. That was heavy in the air. And I think that really is going to be an issue. A lot of the protesters are calling for accountability of those police actions, not just from a year ago, but in the last couple of months in protests that we've seen. And it's also important to remember, of course, that whilst we have seen this growing anger, whilst we have seen widespread protests, as I said, across Turkey, not just in Istanbul, that hasn't actually translated into massive political change. Prime Minister Erdogan's AK party securing a victory recently at the local elections. When you speak to some of the opposition parties, they say, well, look, it's going to take some time. This is just the beginning. But I think there really does need to be some discussion in the country as to how exactly you bridge this divide now. But by, on the one hand, the government having secured power once again, they're still holding the upper hand in many ways politically. But on the streets, as we're seeing time and time again, this anger boiling over. And it really is a shame that on 1 year since we saw that anger spilling over into such violence on the streets of Turkey, that again, the government and the police have chosen to respond in pretty much the same way.